can you guarantee vote? I've been studying on the vote to be the moderator for this debate. With us we have former EU Commissioner Dr Tonio Borg, Chairperson of Alternativa Democratica Professor Arnold Cassola, Head of the Public Policy Department of the University of Malta Dr Zammit, Mr. Zerafa on behalf of MZPN, and Mr. James Cassar on behalf of MZPN. The way the debate will work is that I'll ask questions, obviously they will get answered, but the people in the audience will have the space to get up, come, sit on this chair over here, and ask questions or pass comments themselves. This is an idea which has started last year by JEF. I mean, it's the fish roll concept. So please feel free to join in if you have any questions. So we will start with the first question. You will have each a few minutes to answer, and I will moderate if I need to. So, the first question. Yes, good point. I will ask the questions in English, but you can answer in Maltese or in English, depends if you have any English speakers or There's an issue just stop. So, we can start. First question. The Schengen Treaty establishes certain rights for free, unhindered movement to European citizens traveling to and from member states. Given the current context of instability, do you believe this is a luxury right that we can do without, or should we work towards its survival?
Riguardo Schengen, jena l-argument ta' Schengen, għalissa mhuwiex illi minħabba l-instabilità nistgħu nisuq bħala amended object, anzi, jena nemmen li Schengen mument ta' instabilità għandu jissaħħaħ aktar u jkun iktar il-ħobeġ fil-iktar ħaġa importanti bħalissa mhuwiex illi nikkunsidraw jekk Schengen mhux tajjeb jew ħażin, imma Schengen nafu li huwa mekkaniżmu li jaħdem, irridu naħdmuh. Il-kwistjoni ta' Schengen bħalissa hi li rridu naraw kif se nagħmlu biex f'lejjes bħal pereżempju Greċja u l-Italja fejn qed ikollna intrusion ta' nies barra mill-borders tal-Ewropa, naraw kif nagħmlu biex insaħħu. Però ir-raġunament wara Schengen li huwa bażikament illi il-borders tal-Ewropa ikunu iktar enforzati, però mbagħad il-borders bejn il-pajjiżi Ewropej ikunu iktar relaxed, dak huwa l-free movement of people and goods semmejt inti. Isaħħaħ, jew anzi jissaħħaħ mill-fatt li teżisti l-istabilità. Ġifieri jiena l-opinjoni tiegħi hi li x-Schengen għandu jissaħħaħ mhux jiġi diskuss jekk għandu xi hemmhekk jew le sitwazzjoni bħal
L-ewwel nies kont nagħmel ta' xi nostalġiku jgħidaw jiena minn sentejn fil-ġef huwa tagħmel lura lija li qed illum nirrappreżenta l-FZ hawnhekk naraw li żammejtu l-format li bdejna s-sena l-għaddiet, format tal-fishbowl. So, with regards to Schengen. Mela, l-idea ta' Schengen kif spjega tajjeb ħabib tiegħi James hija li inti l-internal border kun dejjem iżjed relaxed u l-external border. Però Schengen kif ngħid l-idea tiegħu li l-external border ikun secure u l-internal border ikun relaxed. Però il-ġimgħa fil-fatt ex-direttur tal-Interpol qed nirreferi għal Ronald Nobel qal illi Schengen hija Europe's welcoming sign to terrorists. Għaliex għalhekk? Għalhekk għaliex fil-waqt li pereżempju jekk nieħdu l-eżempju tal-Amerika sewwa, l-Amerika għandek il-border control tal-Amerika. U mbagħad għandek l-FBI. L-Ewropa suppost tal-ekwivalenz tagħha illi fl-opinjoni tiegħi bħalissa ma tantx qed jagħmlu xogħol biżżejjed. So jiena naħseb illi rridu li tiftaħ EU Investigative Agency. Kif ukoll qed ikun hemm permanent
thanks for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be here, pleasure to be surrounded with students. This is my first activity with such a fishbowl debate, so I look forward to see you participating and to make it happen, because I haven't been to one before in my life. Again, and thank you for inviting me. I think that this is a very topical argument which you have put on the floor today, and we risk perhaps being artificial or just scratching the surface whenever we talk about something that took so many years to set up, not talking and referring to the European Union, and such a complex and sensitive subject like the security of the internal borders of the European Union. My take would be this, and I guess that as the debate goes on, certain arguments will continue to flow and exchange. When it comes to national security, I would say, and I said this on radio already, I would prefer seeing the leaders, I'm saying the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition, ideally in tune with each other. It seems that on the suspension of the Schengen Agreement, they are not, for various reasons, and they may have their own. I am a bit of a realist, so those who have done international relations, there is a whole set of theory in realism. And I think that the nation state should take prerogative in terms of national security. But that is my opinion. And I know it goes against the grain of perhaps European Union talk. But I take responsibility for that. So, and in order to do that, the nation state reserves the right to take measures that are deemed fit for its security or not. So we have a different reality from, say, Norway, say, Ireland, say, Luxembourg. All member states have different realities. So it cannot be a one-size-fits-all. Now, I end on this. You added sort of the adjective and added luxury. Whether it is a luxury or not, I don't know. When it was introduced, it seemed as a natural step to enhance the rights that we already have for free movement of persons. And that was fine. But the moments we are living right now, may require special action to be taken. And I just say this before I close. In 1942, Franklin Roosevelt, and any survey in the United States would hail him as the best president ever. Perhaps behind Abraham Lincoln or at par with Abraham Lincoln. Took a very, very controversial decision. He signed an executive order wherein all Japanese, all Americans of Japanese descent, even American, even Italians and Germans, were interned in a concentration camp. Now, concentration camp, not the Auschwitz style. They were in labor camps, okay, given food, given jobs, etc., etc. It was a very controversial executive order. But for national security at the time, it was accepted. Now, I'm not saying that we should resort to such measures, okay? What I'm saying is, we live in moments where going to a restaurant in Paris, going to a metal concert, is not like it used to be before. So there may be some measures which we may have to accept, ideally, or hopefully for a short term, so that the security of European citizens is ensured. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will also speak in English because I see that we have some communities and students. Thanks for the invitation. Schengen. I believe Schengen is something which we have fought for freedom of movement, and it should be something which we should strive to keep and to have it as part of our daily life. But in these present circumstances, I think the suspension of Schengen was a prudent thing to do. So, but it's not to be seen as something that has to go, because the question was, do we give up Schengen? Not at all. We have to see how to make it work properly, function properly. And I don't agree with you when you said, for example, because there are people intruding from outside into Belgium, into Italy. We are seeing, Paris attacks are showing us that these are all people who are born and bred within the EU. They are not, and that is why ISIS are doing a big disservice to refugees, for example, to refugee seekers. because of the fear they are instilling into people. People are putting on the same level psychologically refugees and terrorists. So we must work to distinguish between these things. And I tend to disagree with you when you say that we have to look at our national interests first. Nothing will work if we work only at the national levels against these terrorists who are armed not only with the most sophisticated weapons, but also with intelligence. They are very savvy internet-wise, Facebook, YouTube, etc., and they communicate like Heather Mountain says. Unfortunately, we have instruments which have not been put into use. Eurojust, Europol. We have these means of communication amongst the 28 countries. And unfortunately, the Belgian police, who supposedly speak French, and the Belgian secret security, say whatever it's called, knew all about these people and did not get the message around that these are dangerous people. How many of these people like this, who are already known, suspected, are not being monitored? I think we are now going towards another phase, as you know now, as from the 15th of December, we will all be monitored in our flights, all our visa accounts for 4.5 years. The data will be kept for 6 months, plus 4 years, accessible for 4 years, whenever we travel. Okay, it's a time when we have to reflect and see what has to be done, but the energy that's going to be put into all this monitoring is going to be a great amount of energy on all population, on anybody who is traveling, instead of having it concentrated on the real suspects, the ones who are already suspected.
That we are living in times of great international tension, I think it's extremely obvious. But doesn't mean that it is the fault of Schengen. Of course, the populist far-right parties, and even some mainstream parties, are trying to find a culprit. And the easy culprit is Schengen. I was Minister for Security and Information Security for a number of years. When someone doesn't have an answer to something, it's always, it's because of security. Why did you introduce this rule? Because of security. So how many sins have been committed in the past and also are being present in the name of security? So following the 9/11 attacks in September 2001, we had the so-called Patriot Acts, which ended up with the American security services tapping the telephone, the private telephone of Angela Merkel. Not of Putin, of Merkel. And in the name of security. We still have Guantanamo Bay, where persons without trial have been kept for 11 years. During World War II, we had our own Japanese American internment in the name of national security. Incidentally, the Japanese-American incident, it's true, committed by great President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, ended up with not only the state apologizing for that act, but actually paying damages because these people were American citizens. Just because they were of Japanese descent, they were interned, even though they were prepared to defend the United States of America. And even the World War II in Malta, even the First World War, we had Manuel de Met being not only interned, deported, exiled, and he died in exile in 1921, that is to say, 3 years after the war had ended in Europe, not only in Europe. And then in World War II, we also had 43 Maltese nationals being deported to Uganda and returned only in 1945 when the war in Malta. So, I mean, I am very aware of this national interest, national security. Schengen already has an inbuilt system for suspension in cases of tension. In fact, even I don't think this controversy between the government and opposition is only apparent because what the opposition, as I understood it, objected to was an indefinite suspension of Schengen, but under different governments, Schengen was suspended. So when both Belgium came to Malta, Schengen was suspended. When England plays Holland in Amsterdam, the Dutch police suspend Schengen temporarily. What is important is that this does not transform itself into something better. Why? Today, between France and Belgium, 44% of the workforce of Luxembourg commutes every day to Luxembourg every day. 44% is about 150,000. In the entire European Union, within Schengen, 770,000 commute every day. Imagine if we were to introduce permanently, in the name of national security, national frontiers again. This has a cost as well. And the cost would be trade, but also the common currency. In fact, Mr. Juncker said, beware that the moment we lose the spirit of enthusiasm in favor of Schengen, we'll probably lose the spirit of enthusiasm in favor of a common currency as well. So there is this danger, apart from the fact that most of the terrorist incidents were committed by homegrown terrorists, or in the case of Belgium and France, it was a lack of gathering of intelligence rather than the checking at the borders. And I conclude with this one. One of the killers of Paris escaped. He was actually checked on the border between France and Belgium, stopped 3 times on the way, and still he managed to escape. So even when we suspended Schengen, there were criminals, killers, who killed 130 people in a few minutes, who were stopped and still released.
So to stay on this point, do you think that the other member states should follow Malta's course and suspend Schengen for at least the time being?
No, each country, depending on the threat. I don't think that there's an immediate threat to Malta. So it's one thing having France suspending Schengen after 130 persons being killed, following also the Charlie Hebdo incidents in January. So in a matter of 12 months, there were 2 terrorist attacks. Of course, everyone is exposed to a possible terrorist attack. But it depends. Are you in favor of suspension? If you can make permanent suspension, against it. Because I think that today it is part of European, not only anti-communitaire, but of our patrimony. That is to say, something like a heritage of Europe. And I smile when the Americans say something about against Schengen, because they have their own Schengen. In the United States, they control you very well at the external border, but then they don't control you when you fly from New York to California. So this is the idea behind Schengen, is this, that they control you very efficiently at the border, but then there are no internal borders except when you check. Remember, crossing from Courmayeur in Italy to Chamonix in France, they weren't very random, these checks. Actually, the police were boarding each bus because it's the most common way for illegal migrants or regular migrants to pass from one country to the other. But I think that Schengen is not the culprit in what we are viewing today, apart from the fact that terrorism is the result of spread of ideas, and not of terrorism, mostly, of spread of ideas. And so the suspension of Schengen will not stop this spread of ideas. So we have to go to the roots, to the causes of terrorism.
Yes, I agree that what we must fight here is radicalization. And radicalization is also a result of injustices, inequalities, bullying at schools. Imagine when you have people, young children who are born in a country, but because we are different, they are bullied or whatever. And what, for example, the reaction of a madman like Donald Trump, okay, is going to create much more serious problems, because he is criminalizing a whole group of people. Now, terrorism, we have seen in the history of terrorism, is not linked to an ethnicity, to a religion. We had IRA in Ireland, we had Brigate Rosse in Italy, we had the Rote Armee-Fraktion in Germany. We lived through this. I used to live in Italy at those times. The streets were deserted in the 70s when I was a student there. And so you have Christians, you have all sorts of people. So reacting by ghettoing, putting in a ghetto, or criminalizing those 95% of people like the American Patriot Act or the Roosevelt way of acting, where all the people of Japanese descent were criminalized. We only create more resentment, and we create even more. We have to be prudent, yes. But so when there so it's better to suspend. But let's be open, because if we are not open, then we create more fear. And the more fear we create, the more xenophobia we create, the more exclusion, and the greater problems for all of us.
Okay, now we'll have one question, sorry, and then we'll pass back to
It's quite a minor question, it's a small one. You said economic terrorism, and in particular group or ethnicity. How do you explain the fact that virtually every terrorist that ultimately is in Europe in the past 20 years has been carried out specifically by Sunni Muslims and not any other terrorist kind of religion?
not say that possible.
I disagree with you that they had all been done by Muslims, because and possibly because they are financed by Saudi Arabia, who are our allies, and that is another thing we must revise. Can we keep on treating Saudi Arabia as if it were the king of Northern, when Saudi Arabia has a history of financing terrorism, okay, so especially Sunni terrorism, all over the world? Minister, you are a minister, probably have to deal with them too. Because Saudi Arabia is an important country. Should we start calling things by the name? Or should we pretend, on the one hand, we are trying to stop terrorism, and on the other hand, we are helping our friends to finance terrorism?
This question of international politics is true, because I think that the greatest terrorist of today is the United States of America. Not to put down more than but there are these problems, and once you are in government, you have to ask yourself the question, what is important as well? So for instance, because China does not have a democratic system, we don't have a relationship with 1 billion people, okay? Or if we had Libya for 40 years under Gaddafi, so we have no relationship with Libya. It's one thing having a relationship with the country. It's another thing, of course, approving that particular political system. And I can mention Qatar as well. Everybody goes to Qatar, there is an allegation, we don't have proof, that Qatar also directly subsidizes international tourism. When you ask that, and where Qatar was allocated to, was assigned to the question, why Muslim? First of all, there are terrorists who are Muslim. I mentioned this in also in Peru, for instance. And also homegrown terrorism within the United States, with the bomb, the federal building, the home. But in our area, there is a release problem. And so long as there is a release problem, there will be fanatics who decide to try and solve the release question through terrorism. I have visited Gaza, the Gaza Strip. It's the nearest to hell on earth. It's the nearest, if Rio de Janeiro was the nearest to heaven on earth. The Gaza Strip is the nearest to hell on earth. Now, how can you expect people living in the Gaza Strip, ostracized from the rest, not of the world, of their surroundings, with electricity power being cut, with no education except that which is given by the United Nations, or by schools, which are run by Hamas. And then you expect that there will be no terrorist attacks coming from that area. So we have to go to the root causes. Now this will take time, it's true. But we have some festering wounds in international politics in our area, which is causing terrorism as well. Of course, then they link into religion. I believe all religions are actually Islam. Then it's the distortion of religion, the same way as in the time of the Crusades, the distorted religion talk about their countries. There is no excuse for today's terrorism, because today it's also developed, yes, it's developed. So there is no excuse because 1,000 years ago there were the Crusades, then I can have the ISIS today. I'm not saying that. Because the ideas have evolved today. But there is this danger, and the real danger in Europe is that these attacks are also fomenting extreme right-wing groups. We saw the results in France. In Italy, there is a movement where the Lega Nord is assuming much more, getting many more votes. And this is a fear, even of mixing refugees with terrorists. As if a terrorist would embark on an unseaworthy vessel from Libya to come to Malta to commit a terrorist act. I think there are more convenient ways of entering the European Union, particularly because terrorists are well financed as well. The refugees are escaping from terrorism. They are terrorists. They are escaping from terrorism.
Thank you.
You can comment on this point or on the...
Well, yes, I was going to sort of elaborate a bit on this the question he asked, whether I get wrong or terrorist being Muslim, Sunni Muslim, right? And I just want to sort of link that with, again, this is so complex, so every word has to be calculated and taught, and I hope I can do that well in a few minutes. Victor Hugo once said that there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And that resonates in my mind, and it sends shivers down my spine when I think about it, because I believe that Islam right now is going through a phase where that idea is permeating Muslim societies that until a while ago were moderate countries. And we're talking about a patch of history which is only 30 years. And you can check this on YouTube. If you check the funeral of Cassar in Egypt, okay, or Sadat, if you want, you will find no one wearing a veil, no one wearing a burqa or a niqab or anything. Egypt in the late 70s was or seemed to be a secular country like Persia, if you like. Persia in the 70s, you had women in bikinis, swimming, etc., sunbathing, etc., etc. With the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and the fall of the Shah in Persia, the world started assisting towards a resurgence of fundamentalist Islam. And this is why I link it to the idea, this has unfortunately been seeded in societies where otherwise that did not exist before. Professor Cassola before referred to the cases of terrorists where they were homegrown. And that's where the link with Gaza can be made. You cannot make a correlation between poverty or alienation with terrorism. Some of the people that went to Syria to fight are the sons and daughters of professors, medical doctors, architects, etc., etc. Born in France, born in Belgium. By the way, Belgium is, I believe, the biggest exporter of foreign jihadis, if I'm not mistaken. So, the idea of fundamentalist Islam has become a franchise. And I think we are lucky. I just happened to meet them in a book fair. The representatives of the mosque, the Islamic school in Malta, I think, and in my perception, are moderate Muslims. And I think we are lucky to have them, unless there is something which I'm not noticing. But they seem to be a version of moderate Islam. But it cannot be contested, and recently a survey has been issued as well. Most terrorist attacks are of Muslim nature. Now there have been more. The person next to me mentioned the attack to the abortion clinic a few weeks ago. The Timothy McVeigh bombing, and so many others. So we definitely cannot sweep. But that somebody is in a London tube station, just walking, and all of a sudden takes out a knife and says this is for Syria, there is something there. There is something. But people who are born in England, educated in England, and all of a sudden have become disenchanted by our way of life. And they are not ashamed. And that is the monster in the room. I'll pass on to somebody else. Thank you.
Semmejt Ingilterra, preċisament Londra, musulmana ġenċawli, musulmana summa ġbir. Illi da bażikament gradu l-Università ta' Southampton għala solicitor, ma jibx job Londra, once li ma jnaxxilux isib job ma' top London firm, dar għal-radikali l-Islam. Jitlenja l-nies, ġifieri it's been common knowledge ġifieri dal-aħħar snin jitrenja n-nies jirradikalizzaħħom u mbagħad meta l-ISIS bdew jikbru tellaw l-qorti lilu u 9 persuni oħra u meta marru l-qorti 5 minnhom ma ġewx laħqu law ġifieri marru s-Sirja u qegħdin preżentament mal-ISIS. Ġifieri it was common knowledge x'kienet jagħmel dan naħseb l-awtoritajiet Ingliżi they should have acted on it. U fejn hemm sitwazzjonijiet Ġifieri ma jistax ikun għandek inti qed jirradikalizza lek in-nies fil-television station tiegħu kollox jagħmel il-protesti għax imbagħad jagħmel protesti u jkun il-far right ukoll l-Ingilterra jagħmlu protesta ikollok daw ir-radikalisti fuq naħa u l-Britain First fuq naħa l-oħra. Ikaraw l-affarijiet xulxin jitajru and whatnot u l-pulizija fil-nofs. So I think we should let go.
I think that the problem with fundamentalism and extremism is not solved by Schengen. Schengen is completely different. It came out very clearly from the discussion, and we automatically drifted away from Schengen. So I think that Schengen should not even be discussed. Security is important, but security is also at a point when security comes in, it is already too late. It is education that needs to tackle the problems of fundamentalism and extremism. We spoke of poverty before, and poverty creates marginalization. Marginalization exists even in obviously European countries, and that is the reason why we have a number of sons of professors or politicians who are joining ISIS, not only because it is a franchise, but because of what we call relative marginalization. These people are feeling that they are not appreciated. It could be because they are Muslim, and I can link to your question the reason why most of the terrorists would be Muslims, not because these people have an inbuilt defect that they turn out to be Muslim, but because of the way that people out there react towards them. They trigger something and they make it easier for them to turn to another solution, which is going to help someone who actually appreciates them. So this relative marginalization of people, independently of poverty, but obviously also because of poverty, because poverty creates marginalization, has to become directed. The only way to actually attack the problem before it even starts, and that is the only way in which it eventually starts to get solved, is by educating people. And educating people by creating more inclusion. More inclusion means less marginalization. It means that these people do not need to seek help and they do not need to seek friendship somewhere else. And this means that they are happy with Europe as it is, and therefore they are going to harm Europe as it is. And the case in point, very, very good case in point, was the fact that it's not the level of education and it's not the level of wealth, the amount of wealth that you have, but it is the appreciation. And the case in point of the person that you have explained now proves the point that when someone is not appreciated, he is feeling marginalized, he will somehow try to find a way in which he feels that he's doing something productive or react against who has marginalized him.
Which makes the problem more complicated because the lesson about security checks is something one person.
Yes, which makes checking becoming completely irrelevant and even to a certain extent security irrelevant because we need to go much further than that.
So we will take this comment and then we will pass on to a different question.
We talked about education and inclusion, but like the others have mentioned, some are educated. They go to school, they have parents who are professors, so what is missing? What kind of education is needed? And what do you mean by inclusion?
No. I think we misunderstood each other. I did not mean education. Qualifications is not education. I mean, you can go out there, you can meet someone with a PhD who is a complete stupid person. So qualification does not equate your level of education. By education I mean the generation of ideas, the fact that you learn to appreciate other people, the fact that you learn to appreciate different people. And what is inclusion? Inclusion is very difficult to define because it is something that requires a lot, and inclusion is very far from what we have right now. And basically inclusion is appreciating everyone at the same level, creating a level, a standard where everyone fits in it. That is inclusion, where you feel that everyone is equal. And when you educate people, it is not related to one, as I said, the level of education that they have, but it is to this mentality that yes, I can appreciate everyone around me, independently of religion, independently of political perspective, etc., etc.
But how can you influence mentality? You're not in the room, so the most likely way that you're going to touch people is probably going to be school, because that's where most children spend their time. And for children that have unconflicted cultures, or that have parents who are very religious or another culture, the most time that they're going to be involved with other cultures and understanding the mentality of the culture is through school, not anywhere else, except if you have another.
Yes, I never said it's not true. Actually,
but it's going to be complicated to change the mentality.
Yes, it should, just a second, it should basically be mostly through education, and not even education. Education is too late. It is primary socialization, which is the family. So it is social media and the mass media and education, which slowly, and education can't happen from now to tomorrow, so it is a generation. It is a generation that has to grow up. We did not learn how to use Facebook from today to tomorrow, but now everyone knows how to use it. So it is the same idea with creating a different mentality.
We're speaking about education. I'm going to go on a totally different question from the one you were asking for. Some European states like the UK and Denmark have invested time and money in the setup of de-radicalization programs to target vulnerable citizens who are lured by the prospect of violent jihad. So, what is your opinion on this point? Should European states follow this? Because we're speaking about education. On the other hand, we have countries like the UK and Denmark who have set up these programs, de-radicalization programs, to target vulnerable citizens who might be lured by these radical ideas. What is your opinion on that? So, they will ask the question, then ask what make your point.
Although it is true that there are champagne terrorists, this way to say they're coming from a privileged background, all the studies show that the rule is usually to the contrary of this. That is to say, that they come either from families who have been ostracized, separated. They live in unofficial ghettos. Okay? And that this degenerates into a frustration because when you come to a point that you are prepared to kill yourself in order to kill others, because I think JFK once said, what Kennedy said, there is no security which protects you from an assassin who is prepared to trade his life with yours. If he's prepared to die, then whatever security you do, whatever suspension of shelter you do, it's very difficult to protect society from suicide bombers and suicide persons who are ready to commit suicide in order to kill others. It's almost impossible to protect yourselves from such a thing. So, what is important is inclusion. I can describe it in a simple word. Not to feel uncomfortable sitting next to someone who is different from. You could be different in political views, in race, in color. Not to feel uncomfortable, because sometimes what we have, even amongst ourselves, is a subtle inner racism, not an official racism. So the law protects racial equality or equality between religions, but then inwardly, inside, you feel uncomfortable. You feel uncomfortable. And that which should be tackled, and I think these de-radicalization projects are to identify the social environment where terrorism is spread over a period of years. They don't become terrorists just like that. I think that there's a development process. I'm trying to answer this question.
For example, in a case in point, in the UK, they interrogated a 3-year-old. I mean, where do we go from now? From here? Like the programs where should they be introduced? Because obviously the attacks happened in Belgium, in France.
Can even grow up in the worst of environment, there is time for if you get the 3-year-old at the right moment, when you can still influence with the values of life. I think the education we are talking about is an education towards the appreciation, the understanding of diversity. human beings in general, we tend to be afraid of others, afraid of differences. So already trying to understand the differences between us. Go to St. Paul's Bay, for example, in a class in a primary school class in St. Paul's Bay, where out of 25 children of 15 different nationalities, and you see these children together, it's absolutely, they don't know that there's a difference. But their parents and we ourselves have had these problems. So the first thing is to, and when we talk about therefore integration and multiculturalism, if we don't integrate, if we don't try and understand each other and appreciate each other, the result is going to be ghettoization. And that is what breeds eventually the terrorists. If we eliminate inequalities in the world, social justice is important, equal opportunities. If we don't have this access to all these, to the equal access to things, the result is you get the lawyer, whoever it is, who can, and then, I mean, this doesn't happen back to Muslims or to whatever. In Italy, the Brigate Rossa, one of the leaders was the son of the minister, Carlo Donat Cattin. The father was surprised. He was a minister, imagine, acting minister, and they get one of the leaders of the Brigate Rossa, resigned a bit later, of course. But so we must not permit these people to get to the point of what I would call brainwashed ideology, because then we do have a brainwashed ideology where you are so much that death is nothing. Exploding yourself is nothing. Of course, there are also psychotropic drugs which it seems are being taken, because when you think about it, at that moment I think you would think about it, but there are moments when you don't. So all these things, but and the other thing is we have to come back, if we look at ISIS, particularly now at this point in time. We have to fight ISIS financially, in the sense, ISIS has a lot of money. Is it really selling its oil to Turkey? Is it really selling its oil to Iran and therefore financing itself? Are we controlling the weapons industry? Who is selling the weapons to ISIS? Then you will realize that we have to revise certain priorities in our societies too, like companies, armament companies and so on.
It's a question regarding European statements regarding education. If this form of education has never been tried before, how can you be so sure that it will work? I'll give an example. One of the ex-leaders of our Somalia, Abu Mansur al-Arabi, was born in Texas in the United States. He was not part of any ethnic minority. He was raised in a Christian and Arabic household. It was extremely popular in school. At no point was he ever exposed to Islamic education or extremist ideology. But all of a sudden, when the war in Somalia started, he ran over there and became the leader, one of the leaders of the movement, the spirit. I mean, he was never like, you had said that terrorism for the most part is the result of ostracization and social injustice. But he was never exposed to any social injustice. I mean, exactly. And I mean, even terrorists in the Middle East themselves, like I mentioned before, mostly Sunnis are the largest religious group in the Middle East by far. They are the richest by far. They are the least ostracized and most represented. Yet they are still capable of most terrorist acts as well. Like I mentioned before, that most are funded by something in Saudi Arabia. Teach an extremist version. If you look at the statistics, most mosques in Europe are not preaching Muhammad, and they are preaching standard forms of Islam. So it's not ostracization, but it's not the education they're being exposed to. So I mean,
is it possible? I don't have an answer. But is it possible that these speakers, Osama bin Laden and Shabazz person, at a certain point in life, when they had everything and whatever, but they noticed the inequalities in society, and they believe that they can become prophets for these people, and therefore, because of this aim in which they have fixed for themselves, and then go back to the Middle East, the situation of Palestinian people, of many other problems we have in the world, which are always linked to inequalities, to control of water, and to basic needs. And they believe that they are the ones who can change everything. And they maybe have financing to be able to convince others. Most of the fighters who have been going to Syria, it seems from what I've read, go because they are assured of a €2,000 job a month, security, and they are able to kill themselves eventually. So who knows what goes on what made Breivik in Norway, what one man know, go and shoot 68 people on the island and whatever. Okay, these people now were probably linked to ISIS. But how many shootings do we have in America? Schoolboy, 16-year-old in a college, goes and kills into the classroom and shoots around 18 people.
Thank you. So I will ask the question again because it relates to this discussion. So do you think that European states should follow the example states of UK and Denmark and invest in programs that try to track down vulnerable citizens who might become a radical jihad or terrorist? So.
Okay, very important question. I'll link it to the subject of today's debate, which is security versus liberty. It's a question I often ask myself because I have a colleague who's quite into George Orwell, and when it comes to the state taking these measures for the sake of security, we often have these debates. Orwell predicted that very in 1984. In the novel 1984, he wrote that, I believe, in 1951 or 54 or something. Are we ready to give up some of our liberties for security? It's a question which I ask constantly myself. The first time I traveled abroad with my daughter, she was 6 weeks old. I was in Stansted, the UK, and I had to pass my 6-month-old through an X-ray machine. I thought it was too much, a baby, but I accepted it. And I thought perhaps if this means the security of the plane, I have to accept. We all know nowadays, now perhaps you don't remember, but I'm sure the gentleman to the left remember very well, when traveling was much a bigger pleasure. We didn't used to have to remove our shoes, so if you have your socks are not.
We used to travel on tickets, not other people.
Absolutely. Traveling was a much bigger pleasure than it is today. And it will get stricter. I still remember when the liquid ban came about. The liquid ban came about because there was a plot, I believe, to blow several airlines over the ocean. Yes. And through water and liquids, etc. And we had to sacrifice that freedom too. And who knows how many other freedoms we have to sacrifice in the years to come for the name of security. Are we ready to do that? We have data protection. I believe the European Union has turned down, and please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, the European Union has turned down a request by the United States to be given certain information. Am I right or not?
They've approved that we start on the 15th. So between the European States on the 15th of December.
But are we sharing information of passengers with the United States?
We are sharing it already with Canada and with the expected part of the negotiations in detail.
So if you're going on holiday, the Canadian Security Service or whatever knows that you went to them.
They have my visa card and everything. They have all the details of all our things.
And this is just a sequence of measures that have been taken to counter any possible attacks. And unfortunately, and this perhaps is in human nature, evil is always 2-3 steps ahead of good. It's unfortunate.
So, just again,
yes.
the question again of the de-radicalization program.
Yes,
it's the same question.
You're right.
So, even 3 steps ahead of us, are we trying to be 4 4 steps ahead of them and are we being evil ourselves by adopting these programs targeting people who might think are vulnerable?
I don't want to dodge the question, but I have absolutely no information on this de-radicalization program. I will check about it, so it will be perhaps an opportunity. What I would say is that if this is meant to promote integration, as Professor Cassola mentioned, well, that is fine. The thing is that I think it is difficult to identify prospective terrorists. It is. Because many a time, don't ever think that these are the people that blow themselves up, etc., are intensely spiritual persons. It seems, or it transpires, that those involved in the French attacks were, up to a few days ago, a few days before, okay, alcoholics. Apparently, the woman who blowed herself up was quite promiscuous, which is very unusual in Muslim traditions. Having said that, they might have had an encounter, and given their vulnerabilities, not from the educational side, which I beg to differ, okay, their vulnerabilities in terms of their measurement in a Muslim society, they might have been offered, listen, become shahadis, martyrs to redeem themselves. That could have been the case. So education would have absolutely no. Absolutely, yes.
Dal-program semmejt inti bienis. Ma ċekkax fuq jien nkun onest, però jekk kif intajt
Fuq il-kunċett tiegħek.
jekk kif intajt interrogaw tifel ta' 3 snin, ma tantx nafx tagħmel sens, inkun onest iżjed tagħmel sens illi pereżempju kif diġà semmejt kellek Anġem Ċawdi Ingilterra snin dan hemm public jipprotesta. All right, dan kif qed tajjeb inti terroristi kienu minnu kienet alkoholik jekk xejn. Anka Anġem Ċawdi l-Università u kien popolari, kien magħruf bħala bniedem li imur il-party sem whatnot sewwa, u mbagħad as time went by spiċċa radikal-Islamist, u mbagħad tidħol isemma Arnold Cassola l-inequalities. Ma semmejniex punt importanti li naħseb għamel effett ukoll jiena tal-aħħar snin. L-economic crisis. Fl-economic crisis kellek nies li qed iduru lejn il-far-right, sewwa lejn Le ukoll lejn il-UKIP u lejn il-Invest l-Ingilterra, u mbagħad naħseb ukoll jiena issi kont min kien idur lejn ir-radikaliżmu bħala soluzzjoni. Imma naħsibx hi soluzzjoni, imma naħseb kulħadd jagħmel miegħi hawnhekk. Però regards to the program, ifhem ma ċekkjax eżatt, nkun onest. Però jekk il-programm qiegħed iżomm lura lin-nies milli jsiru radicals, naħseb huwa xi ħaġa li għandna nħarsu leha iżjed motiv.
Of course, you asked about the long term, because you can't de-radicalize just like that. I think we should discuss also, in the short term, what are the dangers of the security situation? That is to say, will the governments abuse of their power regarding security? We saw what happened in previous terrorist attacks. That all of a sudden the collective interest becomes supreme. But to what extent does it become supreme? So first it was checking into the X-ray machine, then removing your shoes, then removing the liquids, and now it's X-ray of your internal. So what will happen? Then it's suspension of Schengen. You really have to be very careful that, for instance, what impressed me during the climate change summit, there was a group of people who wanted to protest. Because of the attacks, there was a prohibition of any public demonstrations in Paris. Very convenient. So all that protests on climate change. Because now, my wife said, someone wanted to say, yes, it's a prohibition which makes sense. But does it make sense in actual fact? That we start saying no protests now because 3 weeks ago we had a terrorist attack. So don't jubilee now because there can be a terrorist attack. So we have to be very careful that we don't play the terrorist game because the terrorists, that's what they want to disrupt our life. In fact, I remember President Bush, when there was 9/11 attack, he said it was business as usual, or try to be business as usual as possible.
Before I go to you, I will ask you this question and then I will go back to because they might be linked. You're mentioning the giving up of rights. Guy Verhofstadt of the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe suggested call for the formation of a European CIA. Do you think that this idea will not infringe on the rights of, let's say, rights to privacy?
This is the argument right now. That is, if we want to be like the United States, that is to say, having a strong external border control but no internal borders, like the United States, we need to have a sort of reality. Now we have something called Europol, but there's nothing to actually The problem is that the European Union remains a union of sovereign states. Barroso used to call it a federation of sovereign states, which is a contradiction in terms, but it is true. We try to act like a federation, but at the same time, we want to retain our sovereignty. So I don't know whether these terrorist attacks are enough to push these sovereign member states to create a federal European police, because then federal European police, what does it mean? For instance, right now, France and Germany have sent a letter to the Council, the Council or the European Council, the Council on refugees and on terrorists, and on the creation of a rapid Frontex force, which, if there's a problem in Greece, will go to Greece. So Greece is always to be the weak limb of it, the sick man of Schengen and the sick man of the Euro. Doesn't mean that we have to abolish the Schengen or the Euro because it's a problem in Greece. But there is this idea of sending a European force to a sovereign country called Greece. Now, will Greece accept that? And will France, if it has an influx of migrants at the border, will it accept Maltese or Italian participating in this force? It would seem that we are moving in that direction, which means having more Europe rather than less Europe, having more powers to the center rather than the periphery. But this is an eternal problem wherever there is a federation, even in the United States. The Civil War basically was about slavery, it's true, but it was whether the rights at the center should prevail over the states' rights, whether the federation should be stronger than the states. And even in Europe, it's all the time. Brussels, this vague thing called Brussels, we forget that we are part of Brussels as well. So when they criticize the law of member states, they conveniently forget that they would have voted in favor. They have voted in favor of that law before. So this could be a situation of more Europe. But it's still the political climate with the red off, with Marine Le Pen, with all these Eurosceptics gaining ground. They thrive on lack of central force. At the same time, they are the ones who are against Schengen, who are against Europe, and who are against any central power against sovereign rights. This is the contribution.
So you can answer you have two questions now to answer. You can go back to whether European CIA would work or will it go against our rights to have 2 points to make.
The de-radicalization program, just like anyone else, I haven't come across it in my research. But having said that, it might create a situation of marginalization in itself. So even though in the long term it is aimed at teaching these people and making them feel more included, the fact that you have been selected to be part of this negative program might automatically create a situation where you are marginalized. So it might be very counterproductive. Now, back to the CIA. Europe is currently discussing European intelligence service. It's more of an intelligence service rather than a Europol, which already exists. So it's not a policing system that we're looking for now. It's an intelligence service, secret services, and the free movement of intelligence between different countries, which for people who are in agreement might actually have been or could have saved Paris if the Belgian police would have passed on the intelligence they had about these particular people. Now, if I agree or not with the European Intelligence Service it's a very big issue to agree or disagree with, in the sense that, like any other change, it has a lot of repercussions and a lot of benefits. In general, personally, I am in agreement with the principle. The problem is obviously that you need to strike a balance. If it will actually happen or not, I am very much in doubt of, because of the situation that we have already discussed, we have already mentioned here, that is the far right gaining ground, that is obviously against any kind of, that is more in favor of nationalism rather than European unions, within the European countries. At the end, the thing is that terrorism wants us to be divided, and that is what the problem is. That because of terrorism and to counter terrorism, there is the requirement of more trust between allies, and that is exactly what is not happening. Because obviously fear creates the increased need for security, it creates doubts in itself, and it goes against trust. And so my suggestion would be that, yes, we should, European states at this point in time should actually join together even more. Now, it is very dependent on the political climate, but it is something that is completely dependent from my opinion right now.
So the question is, do you think that this course of action, forming a European CIA, is right given the circumstances, and do you think it will infringe on our rights, like the right to privacy?
Bħala bniedem l-ideoloġija tiegħi federalist. So naqbel ma' James jiġifieri per-prinċipju ngħidlek iva. Però ħanispiċċaw bħall-Amerika illi joqgħdu jisimgħu fuq it-telefon ċettana li l-Facebook chats tiegħek jaraw kollox. Għax jiena mbagħad ma rridx nagħti l-libertà tiegħi minħabba s-sigurtà. Irridu jiġifieri naħseb jien have to strike the right balance. Tiġi debated. Mbagħad ukoll ikollok naħseb jien l-istati, tara l-istati xiriki, għax l-istati mhux kollha jkunu favorijati. Pereżempju jekk ikun Ingilterra, Cameron skur mhux ħajkun favorijat. U jekk tara l-Labour Party li bħalissa mexxi Jeremy Corbyn, ħajbih għalek mbagħad li semmejt żjed tal-Amerika. Jiġifieri tara kif ħadd imxi eżatt. It should be debated, why not? Però issib agreement bejn l-istati.
Choice between then, you have to choose between security and liberty. There might be a point.
Jena ma narax għalfejn li jena għandi nagħti l-liberty for the sake of security. Naħseb we would be playing terrorism.
Yes, this in a way reminds me, if we're still on the CIA, I'm sort of surprised that Guy Verhofstadt came up with this, being a liberal champion himself. I'm surprised. I haven't seen the statement, but who wouldn't expect it from him? So perhaps this should be qualified to see the details. Okay. A very small reflection. This reminds me of the Department of Homeland Security when it was created in the US after 9/11. And all of a sudden they realized that they had hundreds of agencies not talking to each other but sharing each other. And so that led to the creation of the department. My guess is that I'm not strong on home affairs at the EU level. What I would say is, can we strengthen perhaps what we already have? Can we strengthen the institutions that we have already created? Because with a new institution comes new mandates. And we may be very close to losing a very important member state, which is the United Kingdom, from the European Union. So I think the EU is, as always, works in progress.
That is the way forward, in my opinion. Strengthening what we already have, which means strengthening the police cooperation amongst the different states, strengthening judicial cooperation, strengthening intelligence services amongst states. There are not enough resources at the moment given to this cooperation, and we have seen the results. So it is important that we do give these resources to strengthen the cooperation and also use existing tools. Europol is there. Eurojust is there. We have to strengthen them to be able to they are under-resourced. So rather than, because then you need resources, and resources means also finances, and they have to be financed by somebody. So rather than creating a new structure on the American model, we believe it would be much more worthwhile going on what we have, but actually making it work. And rather than now going, just imagine the billions that are going to be spent, as from the 15th of December, collecting the data and sharing all the data on every single person traveling in the EU, which will be kept for 6 months and then another 4 years. Okay? As an aside, also yesterday I think America decided that we will, the people, any European EU citizen who has been to Syria or to Iraq in the past 5 years will need a visa now. So we are also losing that liberty of being able to travel on the bus of the United States if you have traveled to Syria and Iraq. So we are wasting all these resources, these billions, in collecting details about each one of us, rather than concentrating on intelligence, on what we already know, and getting these people, and restraining them. We believe that is the way forward, rather than monitoring everybody, because then that becomes the loss of freedoms which we are talking about. We are all going to lose some freedom. I was in America last year, and you have to go through this machine. It's not nice. I know. Would you like it? But they are usually okay. Why do we have to humiliate ourselves? Because it is an education, sorry, to go through this machine. And as I was taking off the shoes, this is no. You are actually naked. There is safeguarding that is supposed to be secure. And if somebody, because there is that, who is working takes it, well, comes out with that photo. Because this is how it happens. It's like what you said, let's suspend no more demonstrations because of virus, like forestry. Nobody start using it, whoever wants to abuse of it. Says, I don't like this problem, but no more demonstrations. And that's a limitation of freedom.
I tend to agree on this because, of course, it will take time and will be very difficult. Insecurity, as in other matters as well, we are as strong as our weakest link. So if Greece is not organized, just to mention Greece, because this terrorist happened to enter the European Union through Greece. Once he enters the Schengen, then, of course, he's free to roam about anywhere, with no checks. But this applies to everything. So even when we import something from China, if we don't control it in Malta, for instance, once it's in Malta, it can go anywhere in the European Union. So we are as strong as our weakest link. Now, how can we protect ourselves from a weakest link? How do we persuade a sovereign member state, while retaining its sovereignty, to control its borders? There has to be some kind of centralization, or Europol becomes much more centralized and with more powers than it has today. Something has to be done in this respect. The same applies to intelligence. Today, already, the security services of Malta, for instance, participate in meetings at EU level with other security agencies. Apart from the fact that we have bilateral contacts, I won't be revealing a state secret or like regional officials. If I say that Italy and Malta have a special agreement on intelligence, between the intelligence. The same applies to the United Kingdom. So those with whom have had traditional relationships, there are traditional exchange of information as well, not because it's stronger, on a permanent basis. Now, there is this tendency, which is true, that intelligence agencies keep intelligence to themselves, even amongst friends, not amongst enemies, but even amongst friends. So sometimes we had Israel spying on American citizens, American spying. So when we have, as I said, the German Chancellor's telephone being tapped by the United States, I mean, so that even if she says hello to her husband, that is recorded, because another danger of this security situation is that in order to collect information, we have to collect all information. In order to register dangerous conversations, we have to register all conversations, this carpet-bombing type of surveillance, which is extremely convenient for governments, but it is dangerous for our individual liberties as well. And I still do not believe that in order to know and to have the right kind of intelligence, because I agree, I was Minister of Interior for 10 years, the only way one can fight for drug trafficking or importation of drugs is not to open the suitcase of each tourist who comes to Malta, but to have the right kind of intelligence of focusing on particular flights or on particular persons. Now, in order to do this, I think we need some kind of European intelligence agency or an FBI. We already have the first step, and the two most important founder member states are proposing this rapid task force in cases of emergencies, which means that a sovereign state accepts a foreign force on its territory, always across frontiers. But that would be the thin end of the wedge. That will start creating something more powerful.
We're going to take the last comment, so we will take that as your last comment. Something more?
But this might be dangerous in a sense. I don't know exactly the proposal. But if it's well fronted, it is not going to tackle terrorism directly. It's tackling refugees. So, with France and Germany, their main aim now is to restrict the influx of refugee seekers into Europe. It's a problem, there is an issue, but it is not hitting the terrorists directly. Where we could have hit the terrorists directly, and this has come out today, now, yesterday, is again where there was the weak link, which is not only Greece. Today, the EU is going to take us to the European Court of Justice, Malta, Greece, Italy, Slovenia, and Croatia. Because we did not take the fingerprints of all the people entering Malta, Italy, Greece, Slovenia, etc. The Eurodata was this one. So, okay, so there are excuses. That's not to send them back. I know the trick, everybody knows that. You don't take it so that when they escape to Norway, they don't know when they can come back. But then you get one of them, of the killers, got in through Greece. Another one passed through Italy. And another one passed through France. Already. They had already. And so, if we are not even making use of what already exists, then we have a problem. We should strengthen what we have already.
Any last comment?
Yes, last comment. First of all, I would like to congratulate you for being a very good chair. I think that political parties would need to as a win, you know, keeping us on track. So, congratulations to JEF. It has always been my dream to have a debating society at the University of Malta. So, whoever does that,
They're the closest to being more secure.
that's great, and keep doing this, please, because it really helps. A closing note on the topic, very topical argument. I suggest that we read about it. Incidentally, I just received in my office today a book by Professor Paul. It's called Exodus, and it talks about migration. 8 years ago, I attended his lecture in Sheffield in the UK, and it was about a book called The Bottom Billion. And the bottom billion is about 1 billion people who are trapped economically, socially, and even climate-wise. And these people are trapped. And Paul is a scholar in Oxford. And I suggest that we inform ourselves. It's never enough, but we can perhaps make an articulated opinion. Thank you.
Fil-fatt, il-ġef l-idea li għad-debating society kienet ġiet s-sena għaddiet fil-fatt ma' Kejrin, Tamara u Emma. Dejna naraw aħna x'isir Oxford u tlajna ma' Oxford Juni. U għedna din Oxford Malta, u dejna nagħmlu d-debatti tiegħek. Daw id-debatti tiddew ikunu suċċess, għajtu tagħmluhom u naħseb anke fil-futur għad jikbru iżjed. Il-kummenti konklusivi tiegħi Mela, sfortunatament illum xtaqt nitkellem iżjed jiena fuq is-sitwazzjoni fis-Sirja u l-Iraq, però ma tantx kellna ċans. Ħabbar fin. Eżatt, hemm l-Ingilterra l-ġimgħa il-House of Commons għadda l-vot biex jibdew jibbombardjaw ukoll Sirja diġà jibbombardjaw l-Iraq. Għandhom agreement mal-government forces hemmhekk, jiġifieri once il-moments ikunu suċċess il-gvern tal-Iraq, l-armata tal-Iraq u over il-ground li jkunu ħallu. Però with regards to Sirja, m'għandhom agreement ma' ħadd, jiġifieri la ma' Russja, laqas ma' Sirjani. U fl-opinjoni tiegħi hemm naqa' neglection f'dak l-aspett. Għaliex naħseb hemm l-ISIS jekk iridu waqfu l-ISIS hemm bżonn front wieħed kontra l-ISIS. Ma jistax ikun naħseb jiena illi fis-Sirja għandek il-Kurdi qed jiġġieldu kontra l-ISIS. Jiġu Turkija jitfgħu il-bombi lill-Kurdi. U mbagħad għandek Assad u r-Russja, it-Turkija kontrihom u ħalla balla insomma. So to conclude naħseb illi hemm bżonn iżjed coordination tal-aspett.
I don't have much more to add. I mean, I thank you for the presentation. Obviously, we have automatically given you an answer when it comes to how if we should remove Schengen or not, because we didn't even discuss Schengen, showing that Schengen is not the culprit of what is going on. So I mean, it came out clearly without even discussing that we should not even be wasting our time discussing if Schengen should be removed or Schengen should remain. Because it is not in any way related to terrorism. We've discussed how terrorism is bred inside Europe, and it is an idea that we need to fight, and not just a person traveling in. My concluding comment would be that investment should be directed in the proper place, and that is the problem that a lot of money is being wasted in military, wasted in a lot of other things. But the thing is, we should know who we are fighting, and then we should fight after knowing who we should be fighting, and not just carpet bombing everywhere. That's all from my end.
Schengen hija sospiża sal-aħħar tas-sena. Mbagħad naraw is-sitwazzjoni kif tkun u n-situazzjoni mbagħad. Però Schengen għadha ġiet sospiża wara l-Valletta Zammit fiċ-ċokri. Għax fil-Valletta Zammit u fiċ-ċokri meta ġiet suspended iltajna ma' sitwazzjoni fejn inti skont il-Dublin Regulations tapplika għall-eżem sewwa fil-pajjiż li tidħol fih l-ewwel. Iltajna ma' sitwazzjoni fejn kellek jisjed imorru l-Italja jixxu passaport f'pajjiż Awstrijak, jiġu Malta mill-low cost u japplikaw għall-asilu hawnhekk x'nitkellim.
Thank you, Brendan, for opening Pandora's box.
Yeah,
discussion. And thank you for all those